Here.
Kelly Carroll. Harold Jorgensen.
Here.
Barry Wagner.
Here.
Jason Alders.
Here.
Robert Schiller.
Yep.
Jeff Phelan.
Here.
Liz Stockman.
Here.
Okay, the next thing we'll do is approve or amend tonight's meeting agenda. We have a motion to approve this.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Alders made the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Schiller seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we're going to open the public hearing. And it's a primary plat entitled Brian Benz by Larry and Bonnet Skokis for property located at 19112 St. Francis Boulevard. PIN 25-33-25-32-002 and the east half of PIN number 26-33-25-41-0001 for a subdivision of 13 exclusive home sites on 65.66 acres. The first thing we're going to have our clerk give us a description of the investigation.
Okay, thank you. So as most of you know, the property is located on Highway 47, south of County 22. And Mr. Skogquist purchased or is in the process of purchasing this 20 acres to the rear of the 45 acres that abuts County 47 or Highway 47. And the other half of this 40-acre piece from the Dean family is combined or going to be with another property. So we have a total of 65.66 acres, which includes part of Ford Brook and a large wetland complex, which is sort of a fringe of the brook. This was the conceptual plan talked about a month or two ago, and the proposed preliminary plat is consistent with that. The wetland delineation has been finalized. This is a little bit hard to see because there's a lot of information on it, but there's a cul-de-sac, which would be 192nd court or circle coming in off of Highway 47. So a new intersection, the county is requiring turn lanes on Highway 47. And this would eventually be a four-way with whatever development occurs on the east side of 47. So this is a permanent cul-de-sac on the south part of this parcel, and then an extension of the street goes to the north property line. There will be a temporary cul-de-sac here with a sign that says this cul-de-sac is temporary. It will be extended in the future. So these are 66-foot rights-of-way with 24-foot wide paved roads. There is a little divider at the entrance for some landscaping, and then a center median here for landscaping as well. So 13 lots. They're all 2.5 acres or greater. As you can see, the ones that back up to Ford Brook are quite large. But this is your wetland line here, so this is the largest wetland on the site. This is like a moderate quality wetland, which has a 20-foot buffer. And then all these other smaller wetlands are lower quality wetlands, and those have 15-foot buffers. And buffers are required to protect the wetlands. They serve as natural areas that cannot be disturbed and which serve to filter the stormwater before the runoff goes into the natural wetlands. This is a little bit clearer picture without the topography. There's a few notations that I have made on here regarding some areas that seem to be a little tighter. This lot 1 and 2, as far as buildable area, they have shown buildable area, buildability, I should say, and they've created a house pad by bringing in fill, or that's the proposal. Some of my comments were questioning about accessory buildings and what Mr. Skogquist would like to do. Is he going to limit accessory building size, you know, through the establishment of covenants? Because if we have these large lots that back up to the creek, these might be, I don't know the acreages offhand, but they might be as much as 8 or 10 acres. And we base our accessory building sizes on lot size, but you can see there's not a lot of usable area here, so putting a very large accessory building in here might not only look awkward, but you know, would take up a lot of the usable area. So that's one discussion item. This driveway here on lot 4, block 2, goes through 2 wetlands. I think it works. We'll just have to be careful to notify this property owner when they apply for building permit. We do allow grading within this buffer zone, but it looks like, you know, the feathering alongside of the driveway would be within that buffer zone. They are allowed to grade there as long as they reestablish that as a buffer zone and then leave it alone. So these all show the primary and secondary sites. Lot 1, block 2 has a primary and a secondary site, but one of them you have to cross the wetland in order to get to that second site. It is permissible under wetland rules. It's called like a temporary impact. So as long as you restore that, it is allowable. Also, setbacks are shown on the preliminary plat at 100 feet. Our requirement is 120 feet from center line. They've shown 100 feet in hopes that the city would discuss possibly amending the ordinance and or approving a variance for this plat. It wouldn't necessarily have to be for all the lots. There are some lots like this one, lot 1, block 1, that are a little tighter. In other words, you know, it already has a fairly limited rear yard area. It couldn't probably be pushed back another 20 feet and be expected to utilize that rear yard. So I think in part our setback, our front setbacks came from township days when many lots were, properties are owned to the center line of roadways. When you plat property, your property line is up to the street right away. It doesn't go to the center line. So it's not inconceivable to consider a change citywide, but if the city does not wish to do that, then the alternative would be to discuss the possibility of a variance in this scenario for a few of the lots or all of the lots. It depends on your opinion. Sometimes it looks best to have all the homes pretty much set back at the same distance, although you might not even notice a 20-foot difference in some cases. And there are a couple houses that have to be pushed back a little farther to get to the usable portion of the lot. All in all, I think it's a great layout. There's a few tweaks we can make, and we'll talk about those. If we need to process a variance, the suggestion was to push this to next month, so continue this preliminary plat. We could process the final plat with it if we chose to at that time, and then between then And now they could submit some of the missing information or added information as requested by the city engineer. He did have a separate memo, which was 4 or 5 pages long. Doesn't necessarily mean they were all negative comments. They're, you know, like I said, this is a very well laid out plat. So with that, I will allow the applicants to speak if they choose to. Thank you.
Okay, absent, would you like to address it?
Take it out.
Yeah.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jim Brown, that's in your last month. I'm here representing Larry Skokvist and his wife Bonnie for the development. Larry may have some words too, but just a few comments and then we can answer any questions as the meeting goes on. But one of the comments from Liz's report, as far as the ordinance, it's my understanding that 2.5 acres to 5, you can have up to 3,200 square foot outbuilding. And then if it's 5 acres or more, the ordinance, as Liz had mentioned, you can get all the way up to 6,400. Talked to Larry today about that. I think, you know, these are kind of unique lots. We are meeting the requirements for buildability and so forth, but just to allow some more room, and it's going to be a nicer development. I think that Larry, unless he'd say differently now, we would agree just to stick with the 3,200 for all lots and put that as part of our covenants. One other comment was, yeah, just as far as the ordinance, you haven't had a development probably in 10 years. Ordinance reads fine, but there are a few things. But I think if you look around and what is this, but we just feel like the 100-foot setback makes a lot more sense just to make these lots more usable. Which at the end of the day, if you know you have a project, we want the homes and the paths to be usable for those residents. So, you know, less impervious surface, you know, with the shorter driveways, still plenty deep, less grading and tree removal possibly, just more usable area. So it's just a comment, but we understand it's, you know, it's not just for this project, but for others. It might make sense, might not. But that's all I have for comment. But again, we're here for any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll ask at this time if the clerk would verify your legal publications, mailings, and postage has been completed.
Yes.
Okay. Now, we'll open up for the people in the public here, if they want to make some comments about this. You're welcome to come up here, give your name and address. Okay, I'll repeat it again. You're welcome to come up and address it. At this time, this is your opportunity as joining landowners.
I'm Mark Lindsay. I've got 24 acres to this exact south line of this property. I'm curious on a couple things. One is that with the developments, does this increase the chances of getting a natural gas line brought into down 47? I know it's not in the current plan with that's going down Ferry, but with this many more houses going in, I'm curious if that's a possibility.
Mr. Chair, that's something the city doesn't control.
Okay.
It's up to CenterPoint and the Public Utilities Commission.
Yeah.
So I would speculate with these homes and the potential that's going in across the road, that we wouldn't see gas in that area.
Okay.
We have asked CenterPoint, they're starting construction this week on the current project, and they're supposed to get with us in the immediate future and tell us where their next phase is.
Yeah.
And so they haven't announced that yet, but we're hoping within this month we'll know what their next phase is.
Is there a plot map to a larger scale that would show my property with how this plan works in? I'm just curious to see where exactly where
So-
exactly that cul-de-sac is in comparison to my home.
It's right here approximately.
Okay, so it's down in the gravel pit? It's lower down in the gravel pit? Okay. My home's up on the hill,
You're
right above the gravel pit.
Oh, you're over
Right above
there.
the opening there, yeah.
Okay.
And then another question on the previous map.
Mm-hmm.
The lot marked number 9 there, the Ralph Bryan property.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know the exact history, but I know that a lot of some of the buildings were burnt in that some time back, and that there's potentially asbestos and stuff like that on that property. Curious to see what the plan is for cleanup and abatement on that property.
I don't know specifically, but they would absolutely have to follow state guidelines on any hazardous materials and cleanup. There's a separate dump site for anything that's charred. And then they did get approval, at least tentatively, for accessing, keeping a driveway out onto 47 there.
So Liz, who would identify that there's the potential for that?
Well, they would need a demo permit if they, go forward with, or is the structure down and it just needs to be hauled away, or what's the?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
The house was tore down, it was never burnt, and we got a permit from the city at that time to dump it on the line.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, I wasn't really sure of the whole history. I had heard that that some of the buildings were burnt, so.
Oh, okay.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to make a comment? Well, seeing none, I'll ask the planning and zoning if there's any questions that they'd like to make at this time.
Liz, what's the story or the discussion around the street width from 32 to 28 feet, but we're asking for 24, and
Yeah,
how is that tied to a 3-car garage?
there is a little confusion there as far as street width, because the standard plates are showing 26 and 24, depending on if you're urban or rural section, and then the ordinance refers to, as I stated on page 3 of my report, the street widths are allowed to be reduced from 32 to 28 feet in environmentally sensitive areas. So they're already proposing 24, which the engineer has found acceptable. But if our ordinance is requiring 28, it still requires a variance at this time until we get the ordinance consistent with our actual or desired width. If the engineer is okay with 24 feet, I am okay with 24 feet.
How does that tie to a 3-car garage?
Oh, where are you reading?
Page 5.
Page 5, note B, at the bottom.
That was for the driveway section.
Utilities and,
Says approval of the possible recommendation is approval of a variance to allow street widths down to 24 feet. This requires 3-car garages and corresponding width parking aprons, as well as a custom grading plan at the time of building permit per section 10-3-2.R.4.
that just means that the driveway has to match up with the,
The base of the driveway, when it hits the street, has to be 24 feet wide with flares on it. It could be 24 feet up and then you can flare out to your 3 feet south.
yeah, then you can widen out to your 3-car garage. Right.
has the purchase of the Dean parcel been recorded, the deeds and everything?
On Dean's,
Yes.
the Dean Isle property, yeah, we closed it on the 27th.
So, to answer your question specifically, Jason, that did come out of the subdivision ordinance. If you are reducing street widths, the thought is that you're not parking on street, or you're not allowing parking, so you want more parking in your driveway area. You know, here it's not as much of a problem, we have long driveways. And, you know, you can get at least 3 or 4 cars nose to nose. So it's, you know, it comes from probably, you know, more suburban type language, but I'm guessing he's gonna do 3-car garages anyway in these homes, so.
What are the outstanding submission requirements?
Well, we have a list of things needed from the city engineering standpoint. There's a few revisions to the plat showing the temporary cul-de-sacs, and other comments made in my findings, whatever I did with them. So I think once we go through that list, item by item here, it's not a lot, like I said, it's just kind of tweaking things and making sure you're all comfortable with buildable areas, usable areas. We need to talk about the front setback and whether we're gonna allow this through the plat, or if you wanna look at an ordinance amendment or not. Whether you wanna see all lots with the variance or just a few that really need it. Some of them have the room to be pushed back 20 feet, but I tend to agree, and the city engineer does too, that if we're talking about less grading and less impervious surface, you know, that 20 feet difference, it would still allow you to have 3 cars end to end in your driveway. And then those pictures I included were some examples from Credit River of 100-foot setbacks.
Commissioner Wagner.
Liz, are they proposing curb?
Pardon me?
Are we proposing curb?
I think that's the way it's shown. Well, no, he doesn't have to have curb throughout, only as needed for drainage, is the way I understand it. It's still kind of a rural section.
All right. I was wondering, it seemed to me somewhere that I saw that with the 24 feet would be if it was curb to curb, it says.
Well, was that my language you're thinking?
Yeah, where did I see that? Yeah, in your first page of your findings and recommendations. I read 24 feet curb to curb.
Oh. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, if you have curb, I guess I don't have such a problem with the 24 feet, but otherwise, that's awful narrow, I guess, for, well, you think about plowing and, like you say, people parking on it and things like that as well, too. With the rural section, you typically like it to be, I mean, that's why it's normally, or 32 to start with usually, and change down to get to 28.
I don't know, I guess I'm gonna have to talk to the city engineer more about that and get together with their engineer, because I didn't look, or, you know, through our other more recent plats to see what those street widths are.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, I guess. And just to clarify something you said before, you said landscape area in that island? That's actually gonna be a stormwater pond?
Well, when we talked about concept, right, we had talked about sort of a rain garden.
A rain garden, so it's not gonna be included as part of the drainage calcs for storm ponding. It's gonna be a little more attractive, or, you know, with with that kind of vegetation, you see it in some of the developments in east and south metro, and so it's more for aesthetics than it is for drainage. We'll give you more room for snow storage, and it's gonna be part of the developer's agreement that we establish all the vegetation and then it's gonna be, there really won't be any maintenance, but it'll be the responsibility of those 4 adjoining lots. So that was the discussion with the city engineer.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious, usually you don't see a large cul-de-sac like that otherwise, and just the thought that it impacts your setbacks just by having a large
Yeah.
cul-de-sac.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mayor.
so, Mr. Brown, you were saying that it'll be the responsibility of the 4 homeowners on the cul-de-sac to maintain. How would that be enforced? If one wants to maintain it a certain way and somebody else doesn't want to maintain it at all?
Yeah.
Without a covenant, how do you do that?
Well, it's like in the developer's agreement, like with the roads and the, like you get your erosion plan and so forth. You have X amount of years before you become accepted, it will be treated like that. So it's gonna get established and it's gonna be basically, there won't be a lot of maintenance to do it, but it would be restricted to those lots through a deed restriction and a covenant. And, it's basically no different than depending on what section you live, your right-of-way sections. There's not gonna be a lot to it. So,
Yeah, I'm just thinking that, typically land that was farmland and somebody builds a home, if they don't put a cultivated lawn in, we generally overrun with wild plums and the like in short order, with cottonwoods and wild plums. If
yeah,
there's not some type of maintenance, I would assume in short order that would look fairly wild.
it would be more of your wildflowers and that type of thing. It will include a landscape plan as part of the documents. And then that has to be approved by the city engineer. I think that was in his comments, but I'm not positive. That was the goal, is the plan specific for that. They have been done. They're done. They're pretty nice looking. I could have brought some pictures, but I think the first time I came in a month ago, we talked just briefly on it. But yeah, the goal is that we don't want it to look bad either. It's going to be some premier lots around it.
In other words, did I hear it right, that the people who owns the land next to that cul-de-sac would have to do the maintaining of it?
Yeah, if any, but yeah, just to identify it.
It'd be in the covenant or something?
The covenant and or a lot restriction on it, so.
Okay.
This is a 24-foot wide road wide enough? Our city engineer says it's acceptable.
Have you done anything to see if a temporary cul-de-sac will fit with how it might impact those last 2 lots up there?
Yeah, it'll still be within that 60 foot or 66 foot right away. So we're just talking about putting the ears on it as part of the new design.
Okay, isn't there some other temporary access easement that's required as well? Or, to have a full circle?
No, they just get that land back later.
But what is the radius of the asphalt? It's gotta be 110 feet or something, or what is it gotta be?
I would guess it had to match our 66 from the center point.
Okay.
That's our standard plate.
A little unnerving when their planner says, I guess.
I guess, yeah, that's
Yeah.
not a good word, is it?
Well, you know, again, that's where you want to be precise, because that's the value of the public hearing is to be specific, so that. Because obviously it's not shown on there as temporary. We have no idea how soon the north of that will develop, so.
So MinSpec is currently reviewing the acceptability of those septic sites. So that's one thing we're waiting on. There's some, details regarding the grading and drainage.
Liz, did you say the wetland delineation has been approved?
That was approved. There were 2 small areas added. And one was over here on Basin 12, and one was a separate little wetland down to the southwest. So it's not impacting buildability. That's called Basin 12. And then they have made application for the impact to the other wetlands with the road. About 1/3 of an acre that they're buying wetland credits for that elsewhere in the county, or maybe outside of the county, because they weren't available. I just got an email today from Casey, the wetland specialist. This is the grading plan and erosion control. Does anyone have any opinions regarding that front setback?
Yeah, is he asking for a variance or for an ordinance change?
He'd prefer an ordinance change, but he has not made official application for the variance. So that's why I was recommending it be continued, so we can have time to get some of these other items submitted, get that application in if that's what you choose to recommend, and then move forward in a month. We can obviously need to get that road width issue figured out with the engineer. The right-of-way width is going to be the same, so widening the paved part is not going to affect the design. We would just be going 2 feet wider on each side if we want them to meet our minimum standard of 28 or 32. The ordinance does allow dropping from 32 down to 28 in environmentally sensitive areas without the variance, since that's stipulated in the ordinance.
Do you have any more questions here in the planning and zoning? If not, we'll ask the public again if they have any additional comments they'd like to make. So we'll open it up for you again if you want any comments. Making comments. I'll ask it again. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing then. Now we'll act upon it. To me, it looks like there's some some things here where we don't know really about it as far as the, if it should be an ordinance applied or a variance. And like, our planner says there's some other things that need to be cleared up, so I'd like to make a motion to continue this until our August meeting in is that the fourth Tuesday in August?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we need some guidance regarding that front setback. So,
I mean, my at least proposal would be, I guess I'm okay with the 100-foot setback, since it feels like a couple of those lots get pushed back awful far if we go the 120 feet. But I would say you maintain the 28-foot minimum road width and not allow a variance down to 24. And it's 4 feet, so they're still gaining 16 feet or 18 feet on a side. But I guess that's just my opinion, but I'm open to discuss it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would tend to agree with the 28-foot street width. The roads are, I think, 24 without curves is just too narrow, especially with not having shoulders or having ditches. I prefer to see a 28-foot road width. I don't have a problem with the 100-foot setback, but if they need to apply for variance, I think that would be the thing to do instead of an ordinance adjustment at this time, without having further discussion in public hearing about that. But for this particular case, I would think it'd be acceptable as a variance, and whether we limit it to just a few lots, I guess, is the other question.
Across the board.
But I would rather see a variance for the setback and the 28-foot road width, and hopefully before they come back, they have answered several of the city engineers' questions and comments as well, too. As far as the stormwater management and things like that he has questioned. And for the proper easements for setbacks from the wetlands and that type of thing that he has noted.
Planner Stockman, did you say has he applied for a variance then for this?
no, not yet, no.
So we can't do it unless he applies for it?
Well, the reason it came up is because we're doing ordinance changes for the zoning district anyway, and we had talked about it. It doesn't have to be, we don't want to hurry and do that just because of this plat. So the more I think about it, it probably is better just to have them apply for the variance. There's certainly enough environmental reasons to, consider it here. It is a tough site, and I think they've done a good job at working around the wetlands for the most part.
And I would make it consistent and say it's 100 feet for all the lots and not try to pick and choose
That would be fine.
It's
too.
100 feet for all of them, and
Yeah.
we make the road 28
The ones that
feet
have to be back are gonna be back anyway, so.
Yeah,
I have no problem with that, but the thing is, there has been no application for a variance.
Mr. Chair, that is why we're continuing it, so,
Yeah, that's okay, that's why I made a motion to continue.
okay.
Can I speak?
yep. Not my fault.
Yeah.
Have you had a second on the motion?
I have
Not
to
yet.
second for discussion. Anybody want to second the motion? Okay, it dies in a second. Nobody did it.
Go ahead.
No, let's let him speak. Should we let him speak, and then we can?
Well, I think we should have the second first before we speak, and then we can vote on it. Vote it up or down.
Who did the motion?
I made the motion.
Okay, then I'll second it then.
Okay, Mr. Sedana,
And then just like to provide
Sure.
comment to the motion. Okay, so in anticipation of this, I don't feel like we actually have too many issues. We're planning on trying to meet face-to-face with our design engineer and the city engineer just to work out, some of the final stormwater comments he had, and there's some really kind of minor things, but we just, so we get in a sense of time for your next meeting. So we will make application tomorrow, so we can stay on schedule for variance. Again, I think the ordinance amendment makes sense, not just for this project, but others, but that's a policy decision of Melvin. One other comment on that too is, it just, again, gives you more usability, so if you were to push a home up even at 20 feet, there could be more room in the rear to put the structures that you'd like, or stay out of the wetland buffer and so forth, so, yeah, we're fine, we'll make that application tomorrow so we can continue to stay on schedule, because our goal is to have a nice project, meet all the rules, take the feedback, and then we still want to try to also meet the timeline, which is why we asked for the special meeting, so we appreciate the comment. As far as the road section, whatever rural road section has been used for similar developments with the engineer, if it's 26 or 28 or whatever, I guess I would like to just know what's been used before we just say it's 20, but it might be 28, I don't know, but I've got like 4 different sections here, it's a little confusing between, so.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if the standard details were, just some of the standard details for the thicknesses, but the ordinance, if it says 32 with the exception down to 28, I guess is what I would be thinking that it would typically be the
So our goal is to work with staff and to come back with everything, you know, all the conditions met. We tried to do as much as we could without commenting, which came, you know, the last few days, to react would be, you know, so I don't think we'd have a problem with continuation, because we would be bringing back our preliminary and with all those conditions met in the final, so that would be the end of August, am I put a date on that?
So it'll be planning and zoning, the end of August, so you really have to hustle with revised plans,
Right.
and then 25th of August, right.
So I think we basically just meeting with the engineers and resolve 95%.
Right, and there still can be conditions of approval like we do for many projects. But we would like to get, yes, obviously some of these more major things figured out.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll open it for discussion for the planning and zoning. Have any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. So, come back to the next planning and zoning in the 4th Tuesday in August.
Thank you.
All right.
Did you get all that on?
Okay,
Move to adjourn?
you guys want to make a motion?
second that.
Mr. Wagner made the motion, Mr. Schiller seconded the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hey, Jim?
Turn that thing off.
Is there any way we can just jockey this